many things. My name is Anastasia Dnipropetrovska, and right now, here are the main stories. A historic air battle. An American F-16 spectacularly destroyed a Russian fighter jet. Russia announces an offensive on the Dnipropetrovsk region. Another airfield has been attacked in Russia. 2 aircraft have been destroyed. A real revolution has erupted in the United States. Los Angeles is in flames. What will Trump do? Last night, Russia launched a record number of aerial targets at Ukraine. The main target of the massive combined strike was the Rivne region, which endured the most brutal attack of the war. Dozens of drones and missiles, including Kinjal missiles, flew over Rivne.
A very difficult night for the Rivne region. Our region suffered a powerful airstrike from the enemy. According to preliminary information, 1 civilian was injured.
Kyiv and the surrounding regions were also under attack. According to the head of the Kyiv City Military Administration, Timur Tkachenko, an office building in the Darnitsky district of the Ukrainian capital was damaged. Overall, destruction has been recorded in Odessa, Poltava, Dnipropetrovsk and Cherkasy regions. Fortunately, there is no information about fatalities, and this is a new record for the number of aerial targets launched at Ukraine. However, out of 499 aerial attack weapons, Ukrainians shot down 479. Interestingly, all 10 out of 10 cruise missiles and all 4 out of 4 Kinjal missiles, specifically those headed for the Rivne region, were intercepted. So, a round of applause for our air defense forces. Due to the Russian attack on Ukraine, the Polish army scrambled military aircraft into the sky.
In connection with the intense aerial assault by the Russian Federation on Ukrainian territory, there was increased activity of Polish and Allied aircraft in Polish airspace this morning.
Another difficult night, but we're holding on. Ukrainian boxer Alexander Usyk has offered Donald Trump the opportunity to live in his house in Ukraine.
I offer him my home. Let him come to Ukraine. I will give him my house and my security guards. I will provide him with complete security. Live in Ukraine, please, and observe what happens every night. Every night, bombs fly over my house and explosions ring out. Bombs, missiles. Every night. Enough.
It must be admitted, the champion's offer is quite comprehensive. As they say, it speaks louder than 1,000 words. But this night, even the aggressors found no peace. In Russia, things were burning and burning in truly spectacular fashion. Let's start with what has recently become a regular segment for Russians: damaged Russian aircraft. This time it happened at the Savasleika airfield. The information was confirmed by the General Staff, and according to preliminary data, 2 aircraft were hit there, a MiG-31 and a Su-30 or Su-34.
The Russian aggressor uses it to launch strikes on Ukrainian territory. From this military facility, MiG-31K fighter jets, which are carriers of Kinjal aeroballistic missiles, regularly take off.
In Cheboksary, Ukrainian drones struck the All-Russian Research Institute of Radio Engineering.
Well, the bomb over there won't just spray itself away. And then there's an explosion.
This institute is the largest Russian developer and manufacturer. Just a small remark, it used to be the largest manufacturer of electronics for ships and submarines, as well as components used in the production of drones and missiles. The governor stated that after the strikes, the enterprise suspended its operations. Russians are surprised and approach the windows to film powerful footage of the impacts.
War!
That's it! I'm leaving to work.
Because of this, airports in Kazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Saratov and Tambov were closed in Russia. Later, the General Staff confirmed the strike, noting that progress is, in particular, involved in the missile production cycle. Important components for Iskander launchers were manufactured there. In the Kursk direction, a Ukrainian F-16 fighter jet shot down a Russian Su-35. The German publication Bild writes that Ukraine is currently winning against Russia in the air. And it is worth noting that this is the first time in history that an F-16 has shot down a Su-35. The Ukrainian Air Force sent a fighter jet to attack Russian positions in the Kursk region, and in response, the Russians scrambled a Su-35. However, the Russian pilot fell into an ambush because, along with the F-16, a Swedish early warning aircraft also took to the skies, which detected the Su-35 300 kilometers from the border and relayed its coordinates to the F-16 pilot. The American fighter jet fired a missile, and the Su-35 was shot down 16 kilometers from the border, near Korenevo in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, Canadian pilot and aviation expert Mark Brooks writes that the downing of the Su-35 happened in particular thanks to the Swedish AWACS system. It's not just about the F-16. The real game changer was the Swedish AWACS system, which can detect Russian aircraft hundreds of kilometers away and guide F-16 missiles in real time. The Su-35 didn't even know it was being attacked. So now let's move on to the events at the front. In recent weeks, Russia has become much more active in the Sumy region, but the Sumy Regional Military Administration reports that the situation remains under control.
At the moment, there is no reason to evacuate the city of Sumy. The situation remains difficult along the line of contact, but it is under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine and the components of the security and defense forces. I can say that at present, evacuation has been announced in Sumy region from 213 settlements in 18 frontline communities. Over the past week, 900 residents of our Sumy region have been evacuated.
The most intense clashes are currently taking place there, specifically in the Yanakivska and Khotinska communities. However, our military has already started reporting on partial successes of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Sumy direction.
The guys are making progress and are starting to push them out of some of the destroyed settlements in the Sumy region. For now, we are cautiously optimistic because there are more of them, but in some places we are still managing to push them back.
However, the Russians have begun to massively transfer military equipment from southern Ukraine and the occupied Crimea towards Sumy.
Columns of equipment were moving through temporarily occupied Mariupol towards Novoatsovsk and then onto Taganrog. There, according to sources, the Russians were loading the equipment onto trains to transport it to the Kursk region.
The occupiers have also begun actively reporting that they have supposedly reached the border of Donetsk and the Dnipropetrovsk regions and are already conducting offensive operations specifically in the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, this is not confirmed in Ukraine, where officials emphasize that the situation is under control. The Institute for the Study of War has also assessed the situation and whether Russia is capable of launching a major operation there.
At present, analysts assess that the current tactical activity of Russian forces near the southeast of Dnipropetrovsk region is merely a continuation of their offensive efforts in the southwest of Donetsk region and not the start of a new, large-scale offensive operation aimed at capturing operationally significant territory in the Dnipropetrovsk region.
The situation has become more complicated in the Pokrovsk direction, according to the military.
It has become more difficult in our area of responsibility. Their infantry is very well armed. And there is an unexpected problem. The number of UAV pilots has increased significantly. Previously, drone drops were carried out by lone operators. And while that was certainly dangerous, it was predictable.
However, once again, the situation remains moderately under control. Leave words of support for our soldiers in the comments. They really need it right now, and I know they're watching us.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The Kremlin has started talking about creating a buffer zone in the Dnipropetrovsk region, and in particular Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov, commenting on a recent statement by the Russian Ministry of Defense about reaching the border with the Dnipropetrovsk region and continuing the development of the offensive, stated, and I quote, "The Russian offensive in the Dnipropetrovsk region is taking place as part of the creation of a buffer zone in Ukraine, while the Russian Ministry of Defense has already announced that the center group has increased the area of liberated territories in the Dnipropetrovsk region." However, according to deep state maps, although the occupiers are close to the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region, they have not actually crossed into it. Not a single area is even marked as a gray zone. The Ukrainian side, for its part, refutes all Russian claims regarding the creation of a so-called buffer zone in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Right now, we are very close to forcing Putin to end the war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made this statement during a conversation with ABC News journalists.
We have come very close to the point where it is possible to force Russia to end the war, or at least to stop it. We have come very close to this. We can feel it.
Asked for how to achieve victory, Zelensky says, Putin can only win if the war drags on for many years, and in order to make Russia stop the war, pressure must be applied to it. Therefore, Zelensky emphasizes that unity between the EU and the United States is especially important right now. In addition, Zelensky once again spoke an undiplomatic truth about Putin.
My father left. A guy from Kryvyi Rih. He killed his 3 children and his wife with one blow. With a single missile strike. He's a civilian. He wasn't fighting. He's just a civilian. At a child, no.
In the apartment?
Yes, in the apartment. The strike hit the apartment. 3 children and his wife. And do you know what he is? He spoke differently. He didn't talk about any important numbers, about statistics, about how many strikes are carried out. He said, every morning when I wake up, I always look for my family and think that I just had a terrible dream. I look for them nearby, but they're not there. I go outside. I walk down the street and I see a father holding the hand of a little child, just like the one I had. And when I see him holding the child's hand, I feel a physical pain, just pain. And there's nothing I can do about it. I have a pain that doesn't go away. Do people who haven't lost children feel all of this? No. Can the president, who's in America, feel this? No. And that's exactly why we're not children playing with Putin on the playground. That's exactly why he's a murderer who came to this playground.
Like this video if you agree with the Ukrainian president. Ukraine has started a new prisoner exchange which will last for several days. This, let me remind you, is the result of the agreement reached at the second meeting between Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul. Among those being exchanged are wounded individuals and soldiers up to 25 years old.
Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the hero! Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the hero of the nation! Death to the enemy! Ukraine up! Ukraine up! Ukraine up!
Meanwhile, among those who returned home today are soldiers from the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the State Border Guard Service, the National Guard and the Territorial Defense Forces. There are also returned defenders from the Ukrainian Marine Corps, the Air Assault Forces and those who were captured in Mariupol. Meanwhile, a real revolution is brewing in the United States. In Los Angeles, mass protests are intensifying over Trump's immigration policy. Activists are burning flags, throwing stones at the police and have set several cars on fire. The day before, Trump even ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to be deployed there to suppress the protests. The situation at the protests is becoming increasingly dangerous, even for the media. A journalist reporting live from the scene was hit in the leg by a rubber bullet right on air.
A man shouts, then laughs.
The first protests began as early as June 6, after officers from the Migration and Customs Services arrested at least 118 foreigners in the city during a week of inspections for alleged violations of migration laws. But overall, this is connected to Trump's new policy, which is essentially aimed at expelling thousands of migrants from the United States. The European Commission is developing a phased plan for the return of Ukrainian refugees home after the end of hostilities. This is reported by Politico, citing its own sources. Currently, there are about 4.5 million Ukrainians in the countries of the European Union. Most of them are in Poland, Germany and the Czech Republic. Meanwhile, the goal of the European Commission is to ensure a cautious and gradual return of Ukrainians to their homeland, since a sudden and massive return of people could create significant pressure both on Ukraine and on EU countries. Brussels also recommends that EU countries establish so-called unity centers.
Brussels proposes that EU countries create unity centers, information hubs that will provide consultations and support to Ukrainians planning to return. These centers will assist with job searches in Ukraine or in the host country and will offer language courses and cultural activities. The first such centers will appear in Germany and Spain.
At the same time, temporary protection for Ukrainians in the EU is planned to be extended until March 2027. The official presentation of the new EU policy on the return of Ukrainian refugees is expected to take place in the coming days during a meeting in Brussels. In Poland, the results of the presidential election will be reviewed due to complaints about incorrect vote counting. This was reported by Polish radio. For several days now, the media have been reporting on mistakes made by some district election commissions. Members of the commission allegedly counted the votes incorrectly. It is also reported that such incidents occurred in several places at once. A meeting of the National Electoral Commission regarding records of incorrect vote counting in the protocols of some district election commissions will take place on June 9, 2025 at 17:00. The Supreme Court decides on the validity of the presidential elections in the Republic of Poland based on the report submitted by the National Electoral Commission and after considering the protests. At the same time, the review of protests may change the results of the presidential elections. For example, in Gdańsk, Krakow, Tajki and Bielsko-Biała, the results of the presidential candidates Karol Nawrocki and Rafał Czakowski could have been mixed up when filling out the protocols. Given that the difference in the election results is less than 2%, investigating such errors could potentially lead to a change in the outcome of the presidential elections in Poland. Let me remind you that according to the official results, the winner of the presidential elections in Poland was Karol Nawrocki, the candidate from the opposition party Law and Justice. He received 58% of the votes. Meanwhile, his opponent, Rafał Czakowski, received 49.1% of the votes. The French automobile company Renault will produce drones in Ukraine. This was reported by France Info, citing sources. To set up production lines, the Renault Group intends to partner with a French small or medium-sized enterprise specializing in defense. The production facilities will be deployed several dozens or even hundreds of kilometers from the front line. Renault also confirmed to French journalists that they had indeed been contacted by the French government. However, they noted, quote, that at this stage, no decision has yet been made. This partnership marks a real turning point in the company's policy more than 3 years after the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine and is a symbol of the period of rearmament in Europe and the announced large-scale investments in the defense industry. Previously, let me remind you, French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu stated that 2 French companies would produce drones on Ukrainian territory to meet the needs of the armed forces of Ukraine. What do you think about that? Give this video a like to support what we do and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you!